Welcome to the Mind Solution Podcast with Sarah Maud. The Mind Solution Podcast is for leaders like you who are passionate about well-being in the workplace because you understand that a strong, resilient and happy workforce is the key to your organisation's success. The Mind Solution Podcast is here to help you. So join us every week where we'll share with you powerful insights, strategies and know-how to ensure that your people and your organisation are truly thriving from the inside out. Hi there, it's Sarah Maud from The Mind Solution and welcome to another episode of the Mind Solution Podcast. And I would love to kick off today's podcast by asking you a question. And that question is, what percentage of your mind is unconscious? Now, maybe you're going to guess about 50%, maybe you think it's 70%, or maybe you're going to aim your answer in the 90% category. Well, asking this question about what percentage of your mind is unconscious is one that I often ask people on our training programs. And the answers, they do vary, but there are usually a few people that get the question right, which is 95 to 98% of the time we're operating from the level of the unconscious mind. So what does that mean for us in reality? Well, in reality, it means that 95 to 98% of the time we are unconscious. So every thought that you think, every belief that you've formed, every emotional response that you've created, every behavior is coming from the level of the unconscious mind. I think one of the easiest ways to think about the unconscious mind and the way that it works is the analogy of driving. So when you first got behind the wheel of a car, I'm willing to guess that you were very conscious about your hands on the steering wheel. You were very conscious about your foot on the accelerator. Very conscious about not going over the speed limit, very conscious about your 3-point turns and where the window wipers were and where the indicators were. But over a series of lessons, over pattern and repetition, over experience, you got yourself to a point where you became unconsciously competent. You became able to get into your car and drive from A to B without thinking about it. In fact, you got yourself to a point where you could drive from A to B whilst listening to an audible, whilst listening to a podcast, whilst planning what you were going to cook for dinner when you got home. But we're just the same when it comes to how we operate and how we've learnt to do something. So when we've learnt to do something, it just forms part of the unconscious mind. Like the mainframe of a computer, everything that you're doing is controlled by a set of mini programs. And that means that the way that we respond to situations in life becomes automatic. It's habitual. It's conditioned. And unless you've got an awareness of those programs, and unless we do something to actively change those programs, unless we do something to actively shift the way that we think and we feel and that we respond and that we behave, then we'll just keep doing what we've always done. And when you are doing what you've always done in the moment, it makes complete sense to you. Might not make sense to you later, but in the moment, it makes sense to you based on your current level of thinking, based on your current level of understanding, based on all of the totality of those experiences that have formed those programs. everything's always making sense to us. And not only that, but everything that you're experiencing from the outside world is filtered through those programs. So if I was to invite you to think about something that had occurred recently at work, a situation where you'd found yourself getting quite hot under the collar, and I'm not referring to the air conditioning breaking down, but something where you felt yourself getting quite worked up, you felt yourself getting angry or annoyed or frustrated. A situation that you were still thinking about several days later, something you were still ruminating about several days later, something that you were still playing over in your mind, perhaps even weeks later. And it might not seem like it in the moment, but I absolutely guarantee that your response to that situation, it didn't come from the external situation. It didn't come from that conversation with your colleague or with your manager or what happened in a meeting room. It didn't come from the interaction that you had with a client or what happened at a business pitch. But when we experience something that creates a strong emotional reaction in us, the mind goes on high alert. It's looking to understand, why do I feel the way that I feel? And it puts 2 and 2 together and it thinks that it's coming up with 4. But really what you're experiencing in the moment is your own inner reality. Is a reality that's being created based on the totality of all of your experience, based on the totality of your thinking, of your beliefs, of your behaviors, your emotional responses, and what you're filtering that through to make mean in your mind. And that response to that situation, even though it seemed like it was coming from somewhere other than your mind, somewhere other than that internal reality, simply isn't true. And that's why resilience training on its own is not enough. Because you see, we can give employees all the tools in the world to manage stress and build what we think is resilience. But the real lasting change isn't going to come from those tools. Because even if we think about it, even if you give somebody some tools, like you give them a breathing technique, for example, you can have a whole host of your employees listening to how to do this breathing technique in a workshop or on a webinar, but unless they go away and they practice that, they fire and wire together the neurons in the brain that are going to create habitual responses that get them breathing like that on a daily basis. Then when they're in the face of something that's overwhelming them, something that they're struggling with, they're just going to revert to those old conditioned programs, those factory settings. So the real lasting change has to begin with self-awareness, because we can't change something that we're fundamentally not aware of in the first place. And that journey into self-awareness is often a very uncomfortable one, prodding and poking around into why we feel the way that we feel, into our beliefs, into our resentment, our guilt, our shame, our insecurities. We're going to do usually anything other than go looking at those uncomfortable areas. But actually those uncomfortable areas are a gift, because those uncomfortable areas, those thought patterns, those emotions, those identities, those beliefs that create angst, that create contraction, are pointing to where we're not experiencing the fullness of who we really are. And so when we start that journey into self-awareness, when we start by exploring our beliefs, when we start by bringing those beliefs to the forefront, shining a light on them, exploring the stories that we've made up about ourselves, the judgments that we've placed on other people, the judgments that we've placed on ourselves, the identities that you've formed about who you think you are, our addictions, our behaviors, everything that's impacting how you show up. When we start to see that, we start to recognize just how restrictive and limiting our thinking and our beliefs are. And also how much time and energy that we've spent nurturing these. And when you start to bring that self-awareness piece into light, that in and of itself is a game changer. And when we start to explore this, when we start to explore the self, people can jump to the conclusion that, there's all of these areas of myself that now I've got to fix, that I'm broken. But actually, one of the things that we teach people at the Mind Solution is that all of those thoughts, all of those beliefs, all of the identities that we've formed are not true. You know, thinking about thoughts, where our thoughts come from. Thoughts in and of themselves aren't true. Our feelings, whatever we're experiencing, whether that's guilt or shame or insecurity, a feeling can only ever be experienced based on our thoughts. And so if our thoughts aren't real, then we can learn over time not to pay so much attention to them, not to take them at face value, to start to question them, to sit with them, to detach from them. And in doing so, we're able to just calm everything down from the inside out. We're able to calm down those fears, those feelings of lack, those feelings of not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy enough, instead of pushing them away, which most people have spent an entire lifetime doing. And what we find when we do that is the truth. And that truth is that the resilience that we're trying to teach people, the resilience that we believe that we need to teach people, is already there. It already exists within you. You have an innate capacity for resilience. All of the resources that you need are already within you. You have innate well-being. It exists within you. And that really it's just these thoughts and beliefs and ideas that we've held about ourselves to be true, that we've been believing, that's been keeping us away from what already exists. So I trust that that's given you some food for thought and helped you understand what it is that we fundamentally need to share with people if we want to create strong, resilient workforces, that it's just a case of taking them back home, taking them back to the truth of who they really are, free of this old, restrictive, habitual thinking. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, so do feel free to pop them in the comments box or drop me a line at info@themindsolution.com, and I look forward to connecting with you again very soon. Bye bye for now.